everyone. Welcome to the Book Fest, an exciting discussion we're going to have on world building because the world sucks and we've got to go build a new one. I'm your host and moderator, Bill McSci-Fi McCormick, and I'd like everyone to take a minute, say hi, talk about your latest book. Just introduce yourselves to the audience, starting with the lovely and talented Laurel, please. Please.
Oh, hello. I'm Laurel Ann Hill, author and former underground storage tank operator. My current book that's out is The Engine Woman's Light, which is a spirits meets steampunk, alternate California story set in the 19th century. But I just discovered that my publisher has accepted my next novel, and I'm really excited about that. And the tentative name is Plague of Flies.
All right, come on in, Kevin. Join the party.
Hi, I'm Kevin. I'm a German author. Personally, I'm working in marketing, but now I'm writing usually in German. This is my new coming in the US. And I have recently translated my first novel, which is sci-fi, called The Commander. And it will be the intro to my overarching series called Omni Legends.
And Edgar, join us, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Edgar Scott. I spent most of my career as an IT professional, as a DevOps engineer, a database administrator, designer, builder, you name it. Worked for a lot of medical records companies, financial companies, cryptocurrency guys. And I've just left that to do what I actually really like to do, which is write. And I've written a dystopia about the world where we have immersive internet and we can virtualize your head, and it's called 418. And I'm looking forward to everybody telling me what it's like. Thank you.
And Lon, hop on in. We missed you, buddy.
Hey, I'm Lon Vanderdoorn. I am a science fiction writer, obviously. My latest series is something called Junker Blues. I have the first two out. I'm currently working on the third, Junker Blues Europa. Space opera, sci-fi, action adventure type of thing. I also have several other books, but that's my current project. So
very cool. And by the way, it's a good book, so you could just throw that in there for whatever it's worth. All right, so we're going to jump in here now. World building. When I do it, one of the things I like to do is spend way too much time thinking about it, and then spend a lot more time writing stuff about it, and then eventually use like maybe a half a paragraph in my book to get the idea across. But one of the things I like to do for a thought experiment, and I do this with the kids I mentor, and I thought it'd be fun we'd do it here today. Start out with a simple question. Let's assume that the multiverse is more like Hugh Everett III thought of it in 1940s and 50s, where the universe exploded at the Big Bang and there were all these different universes created, which means they're not necessarily an evil Lon out there or a ballet dancing Kevin or anything like that. They're really different worlds with different evolutionary cycles and things. But let's say you were to go from our Earth number 1 to Earth number 2, and even though they don't speak English and they're maybe different looking than us, they're different, evolved differently than us, there would be one thing that you would know exactly what it was and what to do when you saw it. What would that be? Okay, what is the one constant on Earth? What is the one constant that would have to be on a parallel Earth? Jump in, Laura.
Well, I think if that world is populated by people, you're going to have the problems of people. And people like things done their way, and people don't necessarily like other people telling them what to do. There are people who always want power over others, and there are people who will use violence to get what they want.
That's true.
So if you have a world with people, you're going to be dealing with them. Now, if the world has evolved separately, as in Robert J. Sawyer's The Hominids, the Neanderthal, then you can come up with people who are people, but they don't act quite the same way. They've learned to get along in other ways. So
we're kind of getting off track here, because if you went there, all right, Hominids is a really good example. By the way, I love that series. If you went to a different Earth, in this case, the Neanderthal came to our Earth, and the one thing that he could tell, the one thing he knew throughout. The very first thing he was able to do was notice one thing, because their Earth and our Earth have one thing, no matter what else is different, no matter the power structure, no matter anything else, they have one thing in common that will always be a constant on every Earth that you visit.
Well, I would think that they would have to breathe oxygen.
No, not necessarily.
Well, if
go for it, Lon.
Gravity?
Partially. I'll wrap it up here because everyone's looking at me with dumbfounded. Time. You would know how to tell time because it's a 24-hour planet. And if it's a 24-hour planet, you could find an item that's telling time, and you would learn quickly what the numbers are, what they represent, and what time it is. You know the time. Whether they broke it out into 3 sets of 8, 2 sets of 12 like we do, or one 24-hour clock like the military does, doesn't matter. You still have a 24-hour set, 24 increments to compensate, to count. So you would know numbers and time. And that could get you started into learning about the society, because you could see how the signs are done, what things are doing. This is a 1, that's a 1, that's a 2, that's a 2. You could start correlating, but that would be the one thing you would have with you at all times, if you'll pardon the phrase. Yes, Edgar.
Oh, Bill, but wouldn't it be more fun if we actually gave somebody a 22-hour day and then had somebody arrive there? That would just play havoc with them, because they'd always, or a 26-hour day. The day would always be too long, and you would struggle. I mean, we could have fun.
Yeah, you could do that, and that's one of the things in the early science fiction authors they talked about when you went to different planets, because the times would be different. They would have different rotations, different things. That nothing ever correlated again. Christmas shows up whenever Christmas feels like showing up. But my lovely girlfriend is here to give me water. Yay! I love her so much. All right, anyway, back on it here. Let's get back into world building. What are some aspects of a society that you're building that you think you have to think of it all the way through? For example, I'll give you a quick one. I'm going to be speaking on a panel this week about this different ways of using money in science fiction and how they can correlate into real life. And in my book, The Brittle Riders, there's actually a whole new economy in there. There's nothing like it in the world right now. I put way too much time into that. But let's get them, just kind of go around. What do you guys look at? What's the first thing you like to do when you're building your worlds? Laurel? Laurel, unmute yourself, please. Laurel, unmute. There you are.
Okay. The first thing that I think about is what my characters are telling me. Because when I start writing a story, I'm already listening for them to start talking to me. And they're, wherever they are populated inside of my head, they give me direction. So my first thing is I start listening to them, and sometimes I'll talk to them or they'll talk to me. And if I'm building a world that's out there in space in another place, that's very, very different than building a different society here on Earth. And yet there are things that I have to do for both of them in regards to how the beings live, how they treat each other, what's important to them, what's not important to them. Do they have religion? Do they have any kind of structure to society? And it doesn't come like, I've got to start here, I've got to start there. Little pieces start creeping into my brain, and I start putting together this whole world and how it's going to be. And sometimes it happens very quickly, and other times it takes years.
I can understand that. Kevin, why don't you join us on here and tell us what you go through when you're building your universes?
I am like a German probably always does, very structured. So
right. Sorry.
So exactly, yeah. So I'm going through it and thinking if I want to create a world, an actual planet. So I'm thinking first, what's the physics on that place? How does it differ from what we know? And what would the first things be that some person that gets there would notice? Because like I'm writing a window for the reader to see through. So I would only explain things that people would really notice. I've written a lot of books that are really specific on like what plants look like and how the wind goes through it and whatever. Most people wouldn't notice, so I'm not really spending time with thinking about that stuff. So it's really about the whole basics that will eventually build the structure for the whole story that will happen there. That's really all I'm going to do, and the rest will come during I'm writing, actually, because it feels more natural then.
Very cool, very cool. Edgar, you want to join this party?
Oh, I certainly would, Bill. And now that you've asked the question, I thought about it. The last novel that I wrote, 418, is a story about exploitation, and so the thing that drove that story ultimately is money. We have created a class of people who effectively are unpaid because it's cheap to do so, and that's how they're driving their economy. And in the novel that I'm writing right now, my character is in pursuit of that, but more specifically in pursuit of money with no effort. So when I look at a world, and it's probably because of my formal education as an economist, I look at money as being a great motivator. And I go back to the Economist's old saw: every man or woman acts in their perceived own self-interest. So they always act to maximize their well-being or their finances. And so that's where I start with a new world, because you have to have a system of why people are doing things and why they're motivated. And I know that's not a really happy feeling, but I think it's a very true and practical feeling that we can learn a lot from. And that's why I've done it.
Works for me. And, circling back on that, I've noticed in some of the better science fiction books, for example, Dune, it's all about the hierarchy of trading powers. It's all about, who's controlling the financial interest so that they can hold sway over the rest of the populace. And so, yeah, whether it's spices or money or something, there's always something that's trading hands that becomes of value. And even in my books, there's stuff like that. Lon, why don't you jump in here and shut me up? Lon? Unmute. Come on, buddy. Come on.
All I was thinking was just the line, "He who controls the world." So, but for me, I look at who the bad guy is. Who is one of the first things I will think of when I'm writing a story is who's the antagonist? Who's going to be the one that's blocking the characters from doing whatever? Half the time, that's even before I know who the characters are. I want to know who the bad guy is. I want to know, because I always love writing the bad guys almost more than the good guys, really. The main characters are fun to write, but it's always a lot more fun to write antagonists, in my opinion. The ones who are stopping everyone else from doing what they want to do, the blocking the heroes, because they're so much fun.
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. In my new book, Splice, that's out, that I can't get a copy of because they sold out. Well, first world problems over here. But in my book, and Lon will appreciate this, the story is about the birth of a supervillain. There are no heroes in this book. He's an abandoned kid from Omaha, and he discovers that he's very good with computers. And as the story goes on and as the years goes on, he ends up getting tied up with the mob, ends up in the Marines, blah, 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 the usual stuff. But he's not really a nice guy. And I never had someone, I'll tell this story because as writers, you will all appreciate it. I pitched a company on a comic book script. They turned it down and hired me to write a movie on that story. So I wrote the movie on that story. Then I circled back and said, we should have some intellectual property to tie around with this movie because there's nothing else attached to this. So how about if I write the comic book? And they came back and said, nah, we like your writing better. Write us a novel. So I wrote the novel. We sold it to a publisher the day I finished it, and here we are. It's out. But I still haven't sold the comic book, so I'm a failure. Let's circle around here a little bit. Welcome to my world. Let's circle back around here a little bit. I'm going to kind of go in reverse order now. What when you're building your world, you talked about the basic fundamentals. What would you say is a through thread in your work that ties it all together? For example, in mine, in the Brittle Riders, the through thread there is they're trying to change the dynamic of the world that they're living in, and that dynamic keeps fluctuating in and out throughout the whole thing. What would you say is a through thread in your books that gives you a reason to keep writing the story, to keep telling it? Like I always said, I started out to write a 20,000 word story, and when it got done at 310,000 words, I figured I better start breaking it up. So we did. But Lon, go ahead, jump in here.
More than anything, it's just power, what people will do to attain it, what people will do to hold on to it, and trying to acquire more power, and how power eventually will just corrupt.
So they're all craven little bastards. Cool. I like that.
Basically.
How about you, Edgar?
Okay. Well, when I write and when I get into that groove, I just feel like I'm on fire, because I start talking about my character, and I start developing all of these little side. I have many storylines that when I'm in the right frame of mind, they all seem to come together very nicely. So I might have a storyline about finance. I might have a storyline about there's 5 different parts of my story where my character actually could have died if you look at it. I love that, and so I do it because I want to hear what somebody's got to say. Often when I finish writing a piece, I sit back and I laugh at it, because it's released something in me, and it's not always a nice thing. So it's freedom. It's absolute freedom.
I got to agree with you there. Kevin, join us from Deutschland, bit.
Well, my main thing I always try to work into that is basically the heroism idea. So that heroes are not like just coming from nowhere doing what they do. So they are formed. They are formed by their experiences. They are formed by the problems they face. And at the same time, I'm using this anti-hero thing for the antagonists, and also think, why would they do what they do? And I do not reveal that usually in early in the book. So people will always wonder, why the heck is the person doing that? Why is he forcing my hero to like use his skills that he learned on the way somehow to defend himself, defend others? So there's always a little mystery that I like to keep up, which keeps it intriguing, basically.
Oh, so you're one of those like to play coy. I like that. Very funny. Laurel, how about you?
Well, every book is different. Every short story is different. And I write science fiction, fantasy, steampunk, and horror. When I'm writing a horror story, I approach it differently than if I'm writing a coming-of-age novel about a young girl, obviously. And so one thing I think is a thread that runs through many of my stories is the importance of honor and loyalty and love and understanding. And then on the other hand, there are rewards that you get if you do those things. And on the other hand, in my horror stories, there are negative rewards that you get if you don't do that. And so I kind of turn on its head, so to speak, between who is my character, what are their qualities, and then what are they going to be faced with based on their qualities. If I have a very naive person, they're going to get shocked the hell into another word. If I have a very I know-it-all person, they're going to learn that they don't know it all. And so if I have a really nasty person, they might just find someone even nastier. So it just depends on who I've chosen for my character, or I should say, what character has chosen me to write about them, how I approach the next steps. Because each set of circumstances has to give the protagonist room to grow or to fail or whatever they're going to do.
So you're like the beacon of hope in this dystopian nightmare that we're calling a panel today. So that's nice.
Well, I've done some pretty nasty things, and I have one short story I wrote about shape-shifting turkeys, and that is a good one.
I saw a romance novel about were sharks the other day, and I went, okay, we're done. Half human, half shark. It's walking the streets, and don't get it out in the moonlight. Whatever. And it's a romance. I'm trying to figure out how that worked as a romance, but I didn't push my luck by trying to read it. All right, so we're pushing on here, and let's talk a little bit about horror. You brought up horror, and I think that's a really interesting thing. I dabble in horror. I do not write young adult stuff because I've never been a teenage girl. I can't imagine what it's like to be a teenage girl, and I don't even try. But on the other hand, you write what you know. And like for this weekend, I'm reading a horror section from a book called Fun Time at the Apocalypse at Go-Go, which is all from the point of view of a killer. And our killer gets no comeuppance in this story at all. It's just kills. Comes back, kills some more, kill. Uses a cheese grater to skin his victims or her victims. You never find out. So anyway, let's take a look at that. Now, what are some of the things you like to do when you're trying to scare the reader, or you're trying to terrify the reader, or you're trying to give them a different way of going, this is, you want to throw them off balance a little bit. Let's swing back around, Lauren. Why don't we just jump right back to you?
I generally build it slowly if I have time, although sometimes I jump right in so the reader knows right away that something is wrong. But I don't necessarily jump into the point where somebody is dying or somebody's being tortured. I build up to it so that the reader can see it coming before the character does. So I did one particular story where a woman was married to this very disagreeable man, and he, was frivolous with money. He didn't let her have stuff. He beat her up. And so when he dies, she has him cremated against his wishes, and she puts his ashes into the septic tank.
I like it.
Now, the thing is that she makes a critical error in her judgment of what's going on. And you can't ever let an error creep through or you're in trouble. And so, and her husband who died is going to start the Berkeley fire back in the 1920s. And so he is going to chase after her as this burning flame.
Oh, that's going to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
How about you, Kevin? What do you like to do to people to make them go, oh my God, I need therapy? Or he does.
Well, one way of doing it is to kill people that people would never expect to die at that point. Another thing is I get my characters into positions like they are surrounded by miles and miles of water in the darkness of a planet that is just like water, a water world. And he doesn't know where he is, what might be lurking in the darkness, no idea. So I don't even have to use any kind of monster. I just create suspension, and that's enough usually. So people are wondering, how the heck is he getting out of that situation? So usually I'm using surroundings, or if it really is necessary, I'm using the idea of the space, because you never know what kind of creatures might be lurking in the vast outer space there. So there might be some creature coming along next to the spaceship, which is huge, like so big you can just see the eye when you look out the window. So that's also getting people freaked usually.
How about you, Edgar? What do you do to freak people out?
Well, if I really wanted to scare someone, I would write about them. I think that's the most effective way. Satire is a wonderful thing in which we see everybody but ourselves. And so if I wanted to scare people, I first have to have them associate with whatever the situation is. The better I can explain how this is very much like their own life, then the more that then that's more effective when I take that little twist right at the end and you go, oh yeah, and bad thing happened. Because you are going, I see that building as my own. I live in a place like this. I live like that. And oh no, it's not going to work out well. I'm just trying to, I tell you, you're right about ourselves, and we should be about as afraid as we could possibly ever be.
Yes, Lauren.
I just wanted to ask, Edgar, do you ever write in second person point of view? Because a very short story in second person point of view can be really creepy, because the reader, if you do it right, the reader will put themselves in the shoes of the character immediately, and you lead them to this place, which is not a pleasant place to be. And it can be really, really creepy when it's done right.
Thank you, Laurel. That sounds great. I'm just thinking back and what I have to, I was really, and it was very tricky getting people to edit my last novel because I had multiple narrators and had to keep that straight. And I'm told I did. Of course, I think I did, but I was told I did by professionals. The second person point of view, I like writing from just behind the person's head, you know, so that it's as if I'm describing myself. And I'm hoping that the reader will read it that way. But thank you. I'll certainly review it. Yeah.
Yeah. And Lon, how about you? How do you give people nightmares?
I simply give them kind of what they really want. I'll be writing something. There's a series that I'm sort of working on where things are sort of going along. There's some creep factor to it. There's something kind of off. And then when I show like the antagonist, I show just how horrific this woman is by coming out of a bathtub full of blood. So I use history, and I use different things from the real world. Like that's actually from a historical account of a woman who did that. So I basically sort of try to figure out a lot of what Edgar said is, you know, just kind of tell people how they live their life, but, you know, twist it at the end, or give a little twist somewhere there.
We were talking here about, you know, point of view and getting your point of view across and getting the reader involved with you. And I'm going to share a funny story because why not? I'm moderating. I can share a funny story. When the Brittle Writers first came out, I had some other short stories out, and I went to a convention out in Kankakee, Illinois, and I was standing there, and there were people coming around, you know, sign this, buy this, I was selling my comic books and selling my novel, and everybody was having a great time. And I only had one copy left of the Brittle Writers, and it was my girlfriend's copy. I wanted to bring it home. And this woman walked up to me, and she said she was looking for Billy McCormick. And I'm like, that's me. And she said, no. And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm me. I know who the hell I am. I'm Bill McCormick. She goes, no, he's a black lesbian. She'd been reading my stuff. She still is a black lesbian. That hasn't changed. She had read my stuff and assumed that I was her, that the point of view resonated so clearly with her that I had to be like her. And yeah, you know, so I sold her my girlfriend's copy of the Brittle Writers, which meant I had to sleep on the couch that night, and autographed it for her. And she went on her merry way, and she told her friends about this author who relates to subjects they might not expect for a middle-aged white guy. And so I actually picked up a bunch of fans out of that. But when you're writing, do you have a target audience in mind? By the way, I do not. Whenever I'm writing, it's just whatever disease is spilling from my head, I'm throwing it on paper. But when you're writing, do you have a target audience in mind for what each book or each project that you're doing, Laurel? Yeah.
It's going to depend on the story. Obviously, if I'm writing about a younger person, I'm going to think young adult. However, when I wrote The Engine Woman's Light, I wasn't thinking of young adult. It was Kirkus that told me I had a young adult book when they gave me a rating of, I think I was in the top 6 indie teen book in young adult that year with Kirkus. And I had no idea, you know, I was just, oh, really? I really wrote it for an adult audience about a younger person. So sometimes I don't know who my audience might be. I'm still learning. This next book, I definitely know that it's young adult because I don't have such horrible things happening.
How about you, Kevin? Do you have, like, you wake up in the morning and I know you want to overthrow the planet and take over the world and all that. You're German, that's your job. But do you have a target market in mind when you're writing?
Really people like me. So total nerds who enjoy superhero stories, gamers, all kinds of people who are like super into fiction worlds. They play them, they watch them, they read them. So many of those might already know some aspects of those stories, like things that you see a lot in different movies and video games and whatnot. And then I'd like to put in some twists to make them think like, whoa, I didn't expect that. That's not usual here. So every kind of thing that people love about that stuff, that's what I try to build in, like action, all creatures, heroism, antagonists, whatever, everything that's basically Marvel fans, to make it really easy.
I'm more of a DC guy, so you lost me. But
same for me. I love them both.
Yeah, you know, my girlfriend and I, we saw all the Marvel movies, and she didn't really know much about DC. And I introduced her to the Arrowverse on, I don't know if you've seen it, it's on CW.
Yes, I did.
Green Arrow, The Flash, Supergirl, all that stuff. She got into it to the point that she binge watched every show from every season in the order they were meant to be watched, so you could get the chronological threads. She found a map, a site map, and she binge watched them like 4 or 5 hours a day for months. And now they're all gone, and she's like sad. She's got the sads. But moving on here.
That's kind of what I'm looking to get. That kind of people might be interested.
Well, then I'll introduce you to my girlfriend. Wait, that sounded weird. Edgar, why don't you join in on this?
Oh, thanks, Bill. I write my novels for myself primarily, which is a terrible thing to do, because if you want to, continue to be able to write, you should probably keep your audience in mind. Having said that, I'm trying to make it so that there will be a wide number of people who will associate with it. And that was a little bit of a problem for me at first, because I didn't know how to position myself, who I might be trying to sell my novel to. But I had to write it. It's like itchiness in your veins when you've got it. You've got to get that out of your fingers. Discharge it into the keyboard, if you would, so that you can go back to sleep and go back to living a normal life again. I write for myself, but I would love, I also write hoping that other people will see the things that I am seeing and describing.
Cool. How about you, Lon? I know you got a big thing for Mars.
I do. There are two people. The first one is, as Edgar said, is for myself. That's the first draft. That first draft is for me. That's what I want to read. This is my story. This is the story I want to write. Then afterwards, when I'm going through it, I'm editing the story first. That then goes to, okay, who's going to actually want to read this besides me? And I do have there's maybe some Marvel fans, maybe some DC fans, other just people who like kind of like sci-fi adventure. If you like Star Wars, the old, mostly the older stuff, sometimes the new stuff. If you like, just kind of fun science fiction stuff, that's who most of my audience is for certain stories. For the first novel I wrote, which I'm working on a sequel for, that's for a very different, more jaded audience of who also like noir fiction and like darker tales. But and the thing is like for every different series that I work on, there are different people that I have an idea for, but that I do have an ideal reader for each series that I'm working on.
Cool.
And usually they're just giant nerds who have some different aspect or some different slant to them. And as a side note, with your girlfriend, that's dedication.
Oh God!
Wow.
I mean, when the DC Arrowverse came out, I was hanging with some friends of mine in a bar, and we would get together and watch Arrow each week because we liked it. It was a dirty, gritty version on the character, which we liked. And then Flash came out, and they just nailed that perfectly. This guy's kind of the lighthearted thing, and then Supergirl, Melissa Benoist was just that was the role she was born to play, and it just kept going on and on. And I'm by the way, I'm including Legends of Tomorrow, Black Lightning. She's watched them all, and she's seen all of the crossovers. She's watched every single one of them. So we've gone past dedication into probably psychopathic tendencies, but what the hell? She's having fun, just a little bit. All right, Laurel brought something up earlier, and I wanted to touch on it anyway, so we'll do it now. And as always, I'll start off with a little story and share with you. When I was writing the Brittle Riders, there's a character in there named Sland. He's half badger, half human. He's a hybrid. Oh, by the way, all the people in my book, I start out the preamble by killing every man, woman, and child on the planet. So there are no people in my book. So it's a little bleak. But anyway, so this character Sland is in there. And in my head, when I started writing the character, he was going to be my comedy relief. You know, he'd come in for a punchline here, a punchline there, kind of the clueless guy who's like, hey, what's happening? And I was about 80,000 words into this thing when Sland and I got into an argument. And I mean a 2-day balls to the wall argument where he was telling me what he wanted to be in the book. And I was like, no, you're just this. And we went back and forth. Anyway, he won. And because he won, I wiped out about 40, 50,000 words of text, went back and got to a point in the book where I could start developing him. And now he's my through character through all 3 books of the Brittle Riders trilogy, which is actually one book. You can buy it as an omnibus now if you want like a 1,200-page weapon to kill someone with it, but it's out. You can buy that. But he became the character that grounded the book, and he was never meant to be. I had a hero, I had an antagonist, I had a protagonist, I had this, I had that, and I got him. And he's kind of none of the above, and it makes it much more fascinating to read. I'm glad I lost that argument. But so we were talking about that. Tell us a little bit, share with us a little bit the conversations you have with your characters. Laurel, why don't you join us?
Okay. Which one? Let me think of one.
Yeah, I know there's lots of them, but if you could just give us one to give us an idea.
Okay. When I started The Engine Woman's Light, it was as a short story. And the story was of an elderly woman. She is in a dystopian California. She's being sent off to die because people who were impoverished or, you know, not high up on the status level really did get the short end of the stick earlier on in California and in the 19th century, I mean. And so she is given an infant to take care of on the train because they don't have any help. So, you know, this is all she needs. She's, you know, miserable, and now she's got to take care of this baby. And then she realizes that this infant is wearing the garment that she created for her first grandson. And that has been passed down in the family. And whoever, at first she says, oh, you know, my stupid grandkid, he gave it away. You know, he gave it to a charity for kids who get dumped. And no, and she realizes that this is flesh and blood, and it is the first girl child in the family. And she had been praying and praying always that there would be a girl child. And here it is. Cool. And so my story was going to be about her. It didn't end up that way. That did not work as a short story. It was too complicated to be a short story. It couldn't possibly have a satisfactory ending. It became a novel, and it took me 20 effing years to write it.
Whoa. You're like my girlfriend. You're dedicated. You get that thing going, you're going to finish it up.
On the other hand, it's won 13 awards.
Well, there you go. Then
so I can't complain about that. Nope. But I spend time, like the first novel I had published took me 7 months to write. This one took me 20 years, and the one that's going to be published took me 15 years.
Well, it's good they're finally getting out there, so that's good. Yeah.
But one of the things when we brought up point of view before, that it is really important to get the point of view right for each story. And each story does not necessarily ask for the same point of narration. Right. And so part of the thing that took me so long with both of these 2 books is that I was confused as to my point of view. And when I finally figured it out, it was so much easier.
Cool. How about you, Kevin? Do you talk to your characters? Do they talk to you? Do you end up going drinking with them?
Usually I plan out what the main characters are going to be very early in the game, because I'm like a strategizer. I have I've written 12 books by now, but I have planned more than 30 of them. And that's because I am starting to write a story, and then I have to come up with some side characters that just I like. They're witty, they're interesting, somehow they serve a purpose for the story. That's why I create them. And then I try to make them as authentic as possible so they fit into the story. And as soon as I do that, some characters, they just stand out. So I have one story where I created a thief that is just meant, it was initially meant to be just some small antagonist as a side story. So my main character could like catch her and get forward in his own quest. But eventually this character became so interesting and intriguing that many people told me like, why are you not using her more? So I circled back to her and used her more in every other book that I have for that character, for that main character. And that happens a lot. So I created a pirate that was super witty, and I thought, I like him that much, he's getting his own book later on. So I'm already plotting out the story for him now. And that happens a lot to me.
Well, like I said, it happened to me. It's a minor character, and now an entire trilogy revolves around him. So, oops, that made a mistake there. How about you, Edgar? Do you talk to your characters? They talk to you? Does your therapist love you?
Well, my characters are my therapists. That's what I tell you. Of course, I talk to my characters, and they talk back to me. So I wrote a dystopia where we have all worked jobs where we felt that we basically were not paid. I wrote a dystopia where I have an online world where it's immersive. So if you were in Paris, you would feel like you were in Paris, but you weren't actually there. You'd smell it, you'd taste it. Skydiving at night, don't worry about not pulling the ripcord. It's fine. My character is in this world. Because he's in this world, he doesn't actually know what his body is actually doing at times. So he has an owner, and his owner sends him to work. And the story is about him coming to realize that all of the things that he has mean actually nothing, and that he's actually not getting paid for any of it, and that everything that's been shown to him has been absolutely and utterly worthless. And I use that, and I also follow along the story of his boss, who's also trying to avoid being consumed by that working class, which is actively recruiting, people who can't pay their debts, get chips in their heads, and they go off to work. He's trying to avoid that happening to him. So these are things like, how can I avoid this constant creep of, the world trying to push me into the lowest possible economic class, because it will do that if we aren't working hard on it. And then the thing I wanted to give him was hope, so that he would know how to get out of it.
Very cool.
And that's what I've tried to do for both characters, and I believe I achieved it. That requires quite a long conversation, and I do it in a rhetorical way where they're talking to each other or about each other, but they're really talking to me.
Very cool. And Lon, how about you? Have you run up some heavy therapy bills?
More likely than not, yes. I know that with the one character for this one noir series, he and I have had some discussions, usually over a bottle of whiskey, and it gets better and or worse from there, depending on how you go. There has been one character that, when I sort of started to think about what they would do, came at me with a knife. So that was fun. Imaginary character running after you with a knife. So it depends. And the thing is, especially with that one character, is okay, why did they do that? What did I do to them? Because I know, writing wise, I'm a very devious and evil person. So obviously I did something wrong. I want to know what I did. Tell me. So that's definitely one thing I do, is I like to figure out, I will talk to my characters and figure out why they're doing what they're doing. In fact, like for a series that I've planned out, there's one character who I love to write because he's this very sarcastic, very he's an asshole, really. He's a jerk. And he's kind of like a side character to the main protagonist, and it's a talking cat. So that's always fun.
I like it. I like it a lot. All right, we're coming up on the end of things here, the end of all things, the end of all time. We're all going to die, but not yet. But why don't we do this? Just really quick, go around, say who you are, remind people what your name is, hold up a book or anything you're plugging, and where can people find you on the internet? That's the really important thing, because nobody's going anywhere. I don't leave my house anymore. I'm glued to a chair. Till this pandemic is done, I'm locked indoors. So where can people find you on the internet, buy your stuff, so on and so forth? Laurel, begin with the lady.
All righty. And I am a lady at times. The Engine Woman's Light is my Spirits Meet Steampunk novel. It is on Amazon, or you can order it from any bookstore. And my website is https://laurelandhill.com.
Cool. Yeah, I like it. And it's spelled out underneath your name there, so we can see who you are.
Yeah, LAURELANNE.
We don't have to sing it, guys. You don't have to sing it. Kevin, where do we find you on the internet?
Well, since this is my first US book, this might become interesting for people to find me now. Yeah, I'm really have an old copy of my new coming book, which is The Commander. You can find me basically under the Omni Legends name. So it's omni-legends.com, or the same on Facebook. So this is where you can find me and also see the books that I published in German. So you can like prospect what will come in the future, because it's the same.
Cool. Very cool. Edgar, do you exist in the digital realms?
I am. I can be found at edgarscottwrites.com. I have some Instagram and things like that. My book will be, I'm told, the 26th of January. My strategy as an IT manager was to allow people to do their jobs and not push them too hard. So I got some artists working on some artwork, which I know it's going to be cool. Can't wait to see it, but I don't want to ruin it for myself. So I can't hold up the book. I wish I had, but I'm looking forward to more. I'm writing another book that I don't really like talking about books in progress, but because they change on you, I think you know what that means. And I'm also writing a practical manager's guide from my years as an IT manager, which I think will be very illuminating for young people in Generation Z or millennials who are a little, they didn't get a guide when they hit the work world, and I will provide it for them.
Cool.
Thank you.
And Lon, how about you? Where do you exist in the digital realms?
I have a blog called lawnvarnadorauthor.com. I try to get onto that as much as I can. There's Junker Blues, which is the first of my series, Little Crimson Planet, which I think Phil knows. And this is the Noir, which is mostly human. And except for Junker Blues, everything else can be found almost anywhere you can find books. So like Amazon, Kobo, Nook, BarnesandNoble.com. Junker Blues is the only one that is right now an Amazon exclusive, waiting till the trilogy gets out, and then I'll break out more there. Also have audios of Junker Blues coming to Audible. They're already on other sites. They're on other audio sites. Hoopla is one of them. I can just remember off the top of my head.
Oh, cool. We can find you on the digital interworld. We're not going to.
Yes, you can.
All right, and I am Bill McSci-Fi McCormick. BillMcSci-Fi.com is where you can find everything. This is the book I was talking about, The Brittle Riders. All right, get it over here. There we are. If you notice, the book is bent, and it's written everything sideways on the cover because I wanted people to understand how bent this universe is. But there it is. That's Brittle Riders. And it's 3 books that you can buy cheap, or you can get the really big one for more money if you want 1,200 pages. I've got 4 novels out. I've got 7 ongoing comic book series going on. I'm in about 25 international anthologies, and it has been a lot of fun to be here today. I want to thank you all for coming out to the Book Fest, playing around with us, spending some time with me, and letting the audience get to know you better and better and better. Thank you, one and all.